G'day everyone. Welcome to our next presentation in the series for the seasonal updates for February. Today we're going to go a little bit different. Today we're going to have a special guest. We've got Jason Lynch from Pinion along, and he's going to talk about irrigated pasture production and a guide around irrigation scheduling, especially this time of year when ETOs are out at our peak, and making sure we're getting the most out of our pasture growth. So going forward on that, so our irrigated pasture production guide will be run by Jason over the next 20 so minutes. So Jason's from Pinion, and then I'll follow on with our seasonal, statewide seasonal outlook through our dryland moisture probes, which are part of either our weather station network or our dryland or our farming forecaster network as well. So without further ado, I will switch over to Jason's presentation, and we can get going. So welcome along, and thanks for joining us, Jason.
Marek, thank you. I've turned my camera off. Lucky I've got a great head for radio, so you'll just hear the voice. My job is most of my time, and where my passion sits, is in the pasture production space. And certainly at this time of the year, it's coming to the back end of summer, but there's still a lot of growth to happen if we are irrigating. But there's sort of four things, and there'll be some questions no doubt you can come up with. We'll just talk roughly about current pasture growth rates, how much we should be watering. Here's a big one. What do we do if water becomes limiting, and when to stop irrigating heading into autumn? And then we might talk specifics about dryland as it goes on. Thanks, Marek. So these are three main species. We'll just pick on ryegrass, and it'll be ryegrass and clover, or ryegrass by itself, lucerne and white clover. This is when we should be grazing them for each of those species in there. So ryegrass, best to graze about that 2.5, 3 leaf canopy stage. At the moment, with the warm conditions, but it's not too warm, that is taking about 25, 28 days to achieve. And that reflects how often we should be going back into that same paddock. Lucerne, graze it in that late veg to sort of early flower bud stage. That's taking about 28 to 32 days to reach into that. And white clover, for the specialist land producers around and things like that, again, ideally if you're rotationally grazing that, about 15, 20 centimetres in height, that's taking about 25 to 30 days to reach that time frame. And those pastures, for all of those species, ryegrass, lucerne, white clover, they're all roughly growing at about 70 to 80 kilos of dry matter per hectare per day. And that's what they should be doing. If they're not achieving that, we've got to look at, are there issues with either grazing management, there might not be enough water being applied, or pH, etc. So the handy thing with that little table there is, with that rotation length, if the plant's not achieving that stage of growth, we've got a problem. So again, is it fertility? Is it lack of water, etc., and things like that? It does not take much underwatering to have that grazing rotation length significantly extended. So, and if you're putting half as much water on, the rotation length from ryegrass can easily blow out to 40 days plus at this time of the year. So bear that in mind. Thank you. So roughly across the state, based on the current evapotranspiration rate, so that's a combination of what's being lost to the atmosphere plus what the plant uses. For a grass-based pasture or white clover, let's throw lucerne in there as well, we need to replace about 5 to 6 millimetres per day. That will slow down a little bit, and we'll cover that shortly. But if you're not putting on 5 to 6 mils a day, you would have been under irrigating, and hence you wouldn't have been able to achieve those sort of growth rates in the leaf stages. So depending where you are in Tasmania, it will vary though. So the northwest, so let's talk, Devonport, Circular Head, Central Coast, that will vary down to about 4 to 5 millimetres per day. That'll depend. If you're on the coast, you're losing more moisture. If you're inland, you wouldn't get as high evapotranspiration rates. Northern Midlands, let's go Tunbridge North. Well, let's talk all of the Midlands. Tunbridge North, 5 to 6 millimetres per day. Probably a little bit of a note around that one. I think it was on Tuesday, it was particularly windy. We would have had higher evaporation rates. That probably peaked at about 7, even 8 millimetres for that day on the Tuesday, for example. Derwent Valley, so we're talking, that dairy area around Hamilton, either side of that, Bushy Park, 6 to 7 millimetres per day. And the northeast, 4 to 5 millimetres per day. Again, if you're on the coast, it'll be thirstier as opposed to being inland, that little bit less. All right. From here on in, how much water we've got either being delivered to us or able to be taken out of a dam for a storage. We want to do this at the start of the season, but we definitely want to do it at the back end of summer. Here's just a simple little tool in there. February, 28 days to irrigate, roughly 5 mils a day. That's about 1.4 megalitres per hectare. March, 31 days. Things are starting to cool down. Day length shortens. The evapotranspiration rates typically come off the boil a bit. That will drop it to about 1.2 megs for the month. April, I've got a bit of a mistake in there, but let's say we'll typically irrigate for about 14 days in April. Now, that might vary depending on the season between 0 days and heaven forbid, I think it was back in autumn 24 when, irrigation occurred into even early May. That's about 4 millimetres per day, but only for about 2 weeks, 14 days. So we're down to about 0.4 of a megalitre per hectare. So 1st of February until the 14th of April, 73 days, we need to budget on about 3 megalitres per hectare. And, depending on, how good your knowledge is in the space of what you've pumped and how much is left in dams or deliver out of schemes, we need to make sure that we've got that amount of water roughly available if we're going to fully irrigate and if we get no assistance from the sky above. Natural rainfall, if you're not getting probably close to about 10 millimetres for the day, it means that you shouldn't stop irrigating. So you get 10 mils, you can pause for a day. The reason why we work on 10 mils, roughly about 70% of that rainfall is what we call effective. So that'll go into the root zone and become available for the plants to use, and the evapotranspiration kicks off. If you just got like 5 or 6 mils, don't stop. Yes, it will help settle the dust, but it's not functional to try and slow down irrigation based on getting less than 10 mils a day, unless it's absolutely desperate times. Just go on that next bit, Marek. As that previous slide showed, if you're in the northwest or northeast, you can probably have to cut that down by less than, or put about 75%. So we're down to probably about 2.2, 2.3 megalitres for the next 40 days. I just want to talk about this bit. What do we do if water becomes limiting? There's no right or no wrong here because it depends on what people are doing with their enterprise at the time, how much livestock they've got, what you're trying to grow them. But let's say we'll look at these 3 columns. Here's the action, here's the pros, and here's the cons of it. So in that first one, if we're just irrigating right, we make no change, so we just irrigate until the water runs out. The good thing about that is we don't change any of the equipment settings, pump duties, pivot settings, how fast we're running pivots, how fast we're running travellers. It all stays the same. However, it does rely on hoping for some rainfall if we're trying to irrigate fully. And that depends, as I said, who's got animals that they need to finish, or whatnot. Alternatively, if we do have animals that we're trying to keep producing, you know, we've got to factor in potential replacement of that lost pasture production. And you're probably trying to go like for like. So if it's green grass, we're probably going silage. The next would be probably high quality hay. Maybe a high quality pellet comes in there if it can be justified. Or do we destock? And this might be happening naturally. Lambs might be coming to the end of their cycle, or, you know, we're starting to wind down for finishing spring cattle, etc. Maybe not. Or do we just accept the lower animal performance? The second choice is we reduce the amount of water being applied, but we still keep running everything the same way. So what happens is, rather than applying 5 to 6 mils a day over an entire pivot, for instance, we back it off down to, I don't know, 3 mils a day, but we still keep it running round and we're still trying to irrigate the full pivot. The issue there is it can significantly affect pasture growth by under irrigating. And, you know, it's a problem. It does mean that it's easy because you've still got the same grazing rotation number of hectares, but inevitably the amount of feed per hectare will back off. I guess we've got to adjust equipment potentially. So the pivot might have to run a little bit faster. The traveller might run a bit faster just to get over it. And then we've got that same thing. We've got replacement of lost pasture with whatever's appropriate, or we destock or accept lower animal performance. Now, the last one is we reduce the irrigated area, but keep what we're irrigating, keep the balance fully irrigated. So, for instance, you might do 3/4 or half of a centre pivot, or you might only do 2 or 3 travelling irrigator runs, whatever the case may be. That will maintain the pasture growth rate over that area. Now, downside of that is we've got to make adjustments to equipment, which is a little bit time consuming, and making sure we've got the ability to do all that. And then we've got this whole thing of replacement of lost pasture production. Noting irrigated pasture, that probably costs somewhere between about 25 and 30 cents a kilo of dry matter, with a pretty well accepted known good quality, you know, the energy of 11 to 12 ME for green leafy grass, or clover is probably going to be a little bit better, or lucerne. It is cheaper to do it that way. Now, at the end of the day, we've got to do some. This is, you know, the consequences of doing this or not doing it, as we've said in the first example in there, you've really got to understand it. So first of all, how much water have we got access to? You have to do a feed budget, because if the number of lambs being produced is diminishing because we've done a great job and we're pushing them out, then we may not need to worry about this at all. We just continue on as normal and it'll be happy days. And also then understanding the implications. If we do under irrigate, what does that mean for our livestock performance? Have we got animals set in for contract? Have we got animals that we're supposed to get ready for agistment, and someone's expecting these heifers to weigh whatever, 350, 400 kilos, whatever it is? So we've got to do the sums, and those of us that are advisors on here, we've got to talk to people, because it's way too easy. Farmers and agriculture, we are way more than glass half full at the best of times. Hopefully we are. And hoping for rain is not something that we've got control over. Those other two options of either under irrigating or reducing the irrigation area, we're in control of that, and we can make some reasonable firm decisions around what that would be. So yeah, you've got to do your calculations. Reach out to someone who knows some of this stuff and can help you train you up on it, so you can make those decisions yourself into the future. All right. On this example here, we've got a pivot track cutting through the middle, and you can see the lighter coloured pasture with a bit more, certainly a lot lower cover. That is the effect of 21 days under irrigating by about 50%. It does not take much. And if you look at the cover to the left and the right of that, it's dramatically different. So, you know, it doesn't take long. I'm sure people are aware, if you under irrigate, how quickly things can finish out under irrigation. And yeah, it's if we know it's going to happen and we can plan and deal with it, great. But you know, if it's something that we haven't done right and it creeps up on us, we can have some big issues with it. All right. Let's say we've now got through February, we're moving into March. The evapotranspiration rates in March, they'll start to cool down. We typically get cooler nights and the day length shortens up, and soil moisture in most years starts to become less and less of a limiting factor. It's not that it stops, but as we start moving into March and April, you know, these other things start to affect. So we need to work out, when does that start to show up? If we're measuring pasture leaf emergence rates and growth rates, we'll start to pick that up. They'll generally start to slow down because the shorter day, less sun hours, the growth rates start to, you know, maybe fall from 70 to 80 down to 50, 60, whatever the case may be. But, and Marek's the man on this, but if we're using soil moisture probes halfway through the irrigation schedule, so let's say we're having to irrigate every 3 to 4 days on our sandy soils, or sandy loams, I should say, halfway through that period, if we're looking at our soil moisture probes and we've still got about, you know, 50% moisture in that top zone, we can start extending that irrigation schedule. If we keep fully irrigating and just go, right, we're going to keep irrigating until my dry land's fully greened up and happy days, the risk is that these irrigated pivots, that ground, or travellers I should say, or kaline, that ground potentially is at risk of coming into earlier stages of getting waterlogged. So, you know, in most areas in Tasmania, in the northwest, northeast, Meander Valley and bits of northern Midlands, in most years, potentially waterlogging can kick in from sort of July-ish onwards. That'll vary from year to year. But if we've over-irrigated in the back end of summer or back end of autumn, potentially that exposure to being waterlogged and lack of drainage, and then we get nutrient depletion, et cetera, pugging from grazing with livestock, can occur more like a month earlier, even 40 days earlier. Just depends on the seasonal conditions. Plus the fact that we waste a resource, we waste the energy to pump it. Effectively, at the end of the day, that's all on the bottom line. So progressively, you just start irrigating with the same amount of water, but just push it out more and more days apart is the easiest approach to that. I think, Marek, that's, oh, here we go. Here's some contacts and some further reading on there. I think Jacob's on the group. Great job with the weekly pasture growth rate report. I use the Swan system. It's great because it's free. Every morning you get an evapotranspiration report relative to your area. It's very useful, and it gives a 7-day prediction ahead of rainfall, etc. So it's a very handy bit of simple information that gets sent to you. Further reading, you've got Bill Cotching's great Soil Health for Farming for Tasmania. He's got an excellent chapter in there on irrigation and soils, amongst many other things in there. And I think Marek's going to talk about Farming Forecaster, but I'll let him talk about the value of that. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Jason. Now we've done a fair few workshops in the past together as part of the water use efficiency project from the TAS Farm Innovation Hub. But as usual, every time I hear you talk, I've got a heap of questions to ask. So I've been furiously scribbling down some questions, and if anyone else has any questions, please, because I'm not running the whole show here, I can actually look at my screen and add them and chuck them towards Jason. But I've got a couple just to go, and because I've got control over the slideshows, I'm going to jump to the page that the slide that references the question. Now, you're talking about where are we? This slide here. So you talk about that pasture growth rates between 70 and 80 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day. Now, if we're not consistently hitting those, and I'm talking about year on year, if you're doing everything, if you think you're doing everything right and you're not hitting those growth rates, number one, how do you measure that, and how do you make sure you're getting good measurements to know where you are sitting in regards to those numbers? And if you're not hitting those numbers, do you need to do a bit of a health check? Do you need to kind of really drill down as to why you're not achieving those numbers?
Yeah, so the first way that we measure it is with a rising plate meter. I haven't got a picture of it, but let's call it like this. It's a rod that you press up and down or push up and down. And on the bottom of it is a disc of a known diameter, and halfway up there is a control box. So I think if anyone looks up, you can have a look at them. The rising plate meter, we use really simple ones. They're not fancy. They're a precision instrument. It's often the human being that runs at the other end. Perfect. There you go. There's a rising plate meter. There's 30 images of them. So the way that you use this is you'll have a little control box, and that will, as the plate moves up and down, there's a little calculation in the background that will calculate centimetres of pasture height and can convert that to kilos of dry matter. There's formulas for all the seasons of the year, and you can also use it to measure clover. You can also use it to measure lucerne. There's probably a little bit of art to measuring legumes. But anyway, you come into a paddock straight away after it's been grazed. So the sheep or the cattle come out of a paddock that morning or that afternoon. They exit out when they're secure, go back in there and measure what we call the post-grazing residual. You can also use one of those pasture rulers from MLA. Roughly speaking, let's say you go in there and the residual height might be 4 centimetres. That's roughly about 1,400 kilos of dry matter. Then you come back in when you look at your pasture, say every week or every 10 days, whatever it is, thereafter. If you came in and did a plate meter measurement, it's going to be what we call the post-grazing residuals, and you can track what those growth rates are. Typically, everyone's time limiting. Everyone doesn't have a lot of time up their sleeve. So we'd often say to people, come back in on about day 21, thereabouts, and get a post-grazing residual. And it's a matter of the post-grazing residual. Let's say it got to 3,000 minus the pre-grazing residual, say 1,400. My maths on the fly is slightly dodgy, but that's a difference of 1,600. And let's say there was 30 days between that, or 21 days, sorry, I should say, between that. So you go 1,600 divided by 21 will give you, bear with me, that tells me the daily pasture growth rates between when we first measured and 21 days later is 76 kilos of dry matter per hectare per day. It's a great thing to do and get into it in a business by doing these regular measurements. If you're not getting that, I mean, I've probably said that in about 2 minutes, and normally we take about an hour to explain that. So if you see any training on pasture growth rate measurements, I'd encourage people to do it.
Jason, so Jacob has actually just shared within the meeting chat a YouTube video that's showing Simon Jones demonstrating how to use a rising plate meter. So if anyone's got any questions there, they can jump onto the chat group, and there's a reference there for them.
Great. All right, so the next part is a bit more complex. If you're not achieving those pasture growth rates, these are the things that we've got to tick off. 1, get a soil test. Are your nutrient levels at the optimal? So is your Ralston P between 18 and 25? Great. Is your potassium between, I don't know, 180 and 250? Tick. Doesn't have to be above those numbers, just has to be. Is your pH around 6-ish? Good. If they are, move on to the next thing. So then we're starting to look at the pasture sward itself. How much pasture grass is there versus grass weeds? Like, I don't know, could be fog grass, could be barley grass, could be twitch, whatever it is. How many broadleaf weeds have we got in there? What sort of grass ground cover have we got? In a perfect world, we'd have, roughly speaking, about 65-70% would be grass, about 25-30% is legume, and roughly will tolerate, let's say, 5% of other. And that could be grass weeds, or it could be broadleaf weeds. If we're outside of that, then we've got to start looking a bit deeper into it and understand, can we control the broadleaf weeds with a chemical or some sort of process like that, and do a quick recovery, or, are we looking at a full renovation? I think the other things that come into it is, if you graze your pastures too soon, so if you never let them get to that 2-leaf stage, you will never, ever get to that sort of pasture growth rates. You will get to graze your pastures quicker, but it does not work that you will get the same growth rates in there. So you need to allow that pasture to get to that 2.5 to 3-leaf stage if it's a ryegrass-based pasture to get that sort of growth rates. Lucerne and white clover, white clover, let's just talk white clover, slightly specialist crop. Curious thing there is that we can set stock it. You don't have to necessarily rotationally graze it, and you will still get those sort of growth rates. Good research went into that to work it out. But yeah, I think that grazing management's going to be quite critical. And the last thing is, if you consistently graze your pastures too low, so when the animals exit a paddock, if you're taking it down to 2 centimetres, 3 centimetres in height, it is very tough for these pastures to achieve that 70 to 80 kilos of dry matter a day. So, under irrigation, don't let them get lower than 4 centimetres if it's grass-based. It inevitably will lead to pasture decline, and if the short term is the growth rates aren't achieved, inevitably that'll lead to ryegrass death, and clover probably for that matter as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The other one I wanted to touch upon was, the other question I had was around water budgeting. Now, if we need to do, so there's a couple of big, the last one and this one are some big picture questions, but essentially from my takeaway from that is, we need to do, at the start of a season, we need to do an irrigation plan. But to do an irrigation plan, you need to do a feed budget. Is that so? It's what any just quick things out there in terms of what you need to consider when you're doing your an irrigation and a feed budget to the start of the year, to know when you're looking at, I guess that was if you're water limiting, what's your best what is your best option?
That's a really good question, Marek. I work with clients that have got enough irrigation water to irrigate until January, for instance. Some other people irrigate all the way through the year, and some people will only have enough water to irrigate to create an autumn break. I think that the feed budget drives the irrigation, and the irrigation drives the feed budget. That's probably not very helpful, but what we're trying to say is that if you've got a parcel of water that allows you to fully irrigate 100 hectares, then you've got to irrigate that appropriately to allow you to achieve those grazing rotation links, get that animal performance or the pasture performance and subsequent animal performance back out of it. I think that, to a degree, there's an amount of natural rainfall that we can expect during the summer seasons, but I don't know, like the rainfall heading into summer is now probably far more reliable than rainfall heading from summer into autumn. All the things with variability of climate is coming absolutely to the fore. I think that, this starts to get quite technical. First of all, is taking stock of what you've got, water, livestock numbers, and then trying to work out when they're supposed to be finished. Is it a contract lamb, or are you trying to book cattle in for April, May, June, winter market, whatever it is. So there's a bit of science that's going to have to be in numbers to work it through, but it's entirely possible. I mean, the investment that's gone into these irrigation schemes is big, and we want to get them to work as best as possible and, dare I say it, exploit that resource. Here's this one. If you only had enough water, I'll run this through you. If you only had enough water to create the autumn break, this might be of interest. From when you turn the water on a dry land paddock to when it will achieve those 70 to 80 kilos of dry matter a day if it's in summer, or let's say in April under irrigation, good quality, doing say 50 thereabouts a day, it'll take roughly about 40 days from when you turn the water on to when you can get that full growth back out of it. It's got to break dormancy. The roots have got to come back to life. We've got to wet the full profile up. There's a lot of energy and resource that goes into it. Don't graze those new paddocks for, let's say, until it reaches at least the 2-leaf stage before you can start grazing grass pastures. If you graze it before then, it's going to actually slow it down for the next rotation, so be steady on that. What are the other things? This is a big topic, and I'll only just mention it now. People might read a bit more. When we first started irrigating dryland pastures to create the autumn break, we probably have to be aware of things like ryegrass endophytes, potentially, if it's an old species. But yeah, just be very steady on before we run in and graze pastures that have been irrigated artificially to create that break. And roughly speaking, and it's always difficult to say exactly how much water that's going to take, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to think it'll take a minimum of probably about 0.8 of a megalitre, so that's about 80 mils per hectare. And don't be surprised if it goes up to about 1.2 megs, 120 mils to create a full break. Not just where it greens up, but to create that full realisation of plant growth.
Fantastic. That you read my mind with my next question, and it was around that. When is it too late to start irrigating pastures? So I guess what you spoke about, at least that 40 days to get us up to that full production for that time of year. Fantastic. So there we're talking about irrigated pastures. Now, if we just jump across to a dryland pasture, if we do happen to get some rain, this month, or a couple of significant rainfall events, through February, March, and then leading into that autumn break, are they going to affect certain species differently? The rainfall that we potentially comes along in the next couple of months?
They will, and they do. And I'll declare my hand here. I'm a major aficionado of cocksfoot for many reasons, principally because it'll also be one of the first ones that comes alive in autumn. It's got a big chunky root system, and if I spoke 40 days for ryegrass, it's probably closer to a shade over 30 for cocksfoot. So shout out to the cocksfoot plant out there. Thanks for that. In saying that, not all cocksfoots are created equal. You can get some cocksfoots which are a bit more summer active, but they'll all roughly behave in a very, very rapid response. All other grasses are, to a degree, much of a muchance. Ryegrass, about that 40-day response. Phalaris, 40 days-ish, but first time to grazing for that plant's not really there. If you talk about what that's there for in the Midlands, it's survival. So Phalaris is good that it doesn't respond to a false break. It's designed to, wait till those root systems are growing and then comes back. But it'll still roughly be about that 40 days, as long as the rainfall's not limiting in that time. If we get 20 mils and then there's like 3 weeks and you get another 20 mils, that 40-day timeline period blows out, and it will be 50, even 60 days before we get those growth rates. But bear in mind, 60 days after the 1st of March, all of a sudden becomes the 1st of May, and then, short day length temperature, like the growth rates, as everyone knows, lack of water isn't the limiting factor then. It's cold temperatures and a short day. So, it is what it is at that stage if it takes that long.
Right. All right. Now, I did, when I spoke, I said 20 minutes of your time, Jason, but I've extended that just because I enjoy listening to what you got to say so much. But I want to just leave you, I will just ask you one more quick answer to a question. What should people be thinking about or talking about at the moment, which we generally are not thinking about when it comes to this time of year? Just to put you on
whether
the spot.
This is let's broaden this out for pasture production right across the board. Do not go into the back end of summer with a lot of standing feed on your property. Now, under irrigation, I'm sure people would have managed it well and kept a good clip on the grass, not let it get out of hand. Dry land, we talk about it being standing hay, and we love that dry standing feed, and it's good. But by the time the autumn break comes in, or starts to come in that window, let's say the end of this month into early March, sorry, you need to have the dry land paddocks set and ready to go. Eat off that dry standing feed that accumulated in spring and early summer. Don't let that hang around, because when the autumn break comes through, that feed goes rank pretty quick. The dew sets in and things like that. So, and it's also definitely good for suppression of survival of things like corby grubs in particular. They don't like the eggs being exposed to summer conditions and a bit of heat at the back end of summer and early March. So I'll leave you with that, Marek.
Brilliant. Really appreciate it, Jason. Thank you very much. And for everyone who's online or listening afterwards, we'll come out with a fact sheet with summary of all Jason's points and slides. So yeah, appreciate it, Jason. Thank you very much. Right, so back to our seasonal snapshot that we deliver every week. Now, I've had no problems with Jason going through all that with time-wise, because like I was saying last time, we're pretty much status quo in terms of where things are at. We're dry. This is what we're usually at when it comes to this time of year in Tassie, but we'll go through a quick rip around to see where we're at. So when it comes to the northwest coast, if we look at Wool North, I would say there's no free lunch when it comes to soil water and rainfall and soil water. It all gets used up in some period. It's just what we get out of it that's the difference. So if we can see here, Wool North, which was probably the wettest part of the state, coming through that late winter, early spring, we're pretty much coming up to that point where we're drawing up most of that available moisture, and pretty similar point at the same time last year. If we come down onto a heavier soil a bit further inland, we're pretty much bang on where we were in that Edith Creek, those heavier soil regions. Come down the coast a bit towards Yolla. This one here's a little bit different in terms of we're just drawn up a bit of subsoil moisture, and that one there on this soil was because we just had that Goldilocks window, so we had a greater capacity for roots to explore that soil moisture and get down there, because we didn't have that either dry conditions in that early spring. And then sassafras again, I mean, we're at the similar point where we were last year, which is not surprising. I think I'm going to be quite repetitive when I go through all these graphs. So a summary for the northwest coast, as I said, similar at the same point, same time last year. In terms of, and following on from what Jason was speaking about in terms of crop water requirements, and we're talking potatoes, peas, and any of those irrigated pastures, we're looking at about 40 to 45 mils of irrigation per week. One thing I did want to touch on, particularly in that northwest coast, is any early season potatoes. Start thinking about having a buffer zone. I know while we don't have any rainfall on the horizon, it's these summer rainfall events that can catch us unawares on our spuds. Not so much early season. This is something I will touch upon and talk a bit more in our next slideshow in terms of creating that buffer zone, particularly later season spuds, is to have a bit of a buffer zone. So when I'm talking about that, when I break it up into our growth rates when it comes to spuds, early season, tuber initiation, making sure we've got good soil moisture, peak ETO for our crop. We're drawing moisture in that top 40, 50 centimetres. And as we can see here, that's peak water use. And as the crop starts to slow down, we can see that slow down in growth. So we want to make sure that we've got a buffer. So we've used up moisture within that 50 to 60 centimetre zone. So if we did happen to get a large rainfall event, we've got somewhere to store it beneath where the tubers are sitting, not within the tuber zone. So number one, you can get onto the paddock, and number two, you're not getting issues when it comes to quality of your tubers. So this is something I'll touch on a bit more next, going into depth a bit more, but that's something to just consider for your early season potatoes. If we swing across to the northeast, so Oakbank, that Pipers River region, again, we're pretty similar at the same time we were last year. Ringarooma, pretty much again, bang on when you go further into the coasts. And if we go up on those sandy soils, up around that Waterhouse region, we're kind of sitting similar to where we were last year. And we're starting to, we're getting that full season of measuring soil moisture in that part of the state as well. So summary for there. So again, same time last year, around that 40 to 55 mils a week, and those same thing, those crops there. So Northern Midlands, Parkham, around that Elizabethtown region, again, sitting pretty similar where we were. In Meander, this one's a little bit different compared to the others in terms of we've had the season we had it, didn't have that Goldilocks winter really played itself out in terms of you can see here we weren't flatline. So coming out of 2 years ago, we had quite a wet winter, but rainfall stopped in that September, October. So a lot of that moisture was used early. Last year, we kind of sat wet and that extended out. So you can see here, things took a long time, took a bit of time to kick off. But this year, that winter where we didn't go into a major waterlogged state, we can see we had pasture growth through here. And while it did extend it really, this is the kind of curve we want to see. This is what we would almost call, in inverted commas, that normal year. So that's what we're kind of seeing. And the other two were extremes of those. So that little microclimate that we know of Meander and Derry Plains is a little bit different compared to the rest. But if we then go to Hagley is pretty similar to the same time last year. Bishopsburn, around that Cressy-Longford region, again, pretty similar. And Elsdon, this is that time of year where things have just been exhausted and they've just been used up on those as we go a bit further south through there. So that 3 years ago was that 2021-22 season, which was one out of the bag. But as we can see here, wherever your soil moisture is used up, we seem to hit that same point. It's that gap there, it's that period there of what we're making, but that's the important part. So the summary for the Northern Midlands, similar to the same time last year. In terms of those irrigate soils, those sandy loam soils that we're irrigating for cropping in particular, low infiltration rates when it's windier and dry, so make sure you don't fall behind. While Jason was talking about 10 mils, I like to chuck in human, the psychology of human irrigating. The fantastic 10 mils. I can wait a couple of days before I irrigate, so I just bump that up to 12 just to take into account our want to just overestimate how much that's worth to us. So irrigate for the rain that's fallen, not what's forecast, and then again we increase that evapotranspiration for further inland where we're sitting around those ETOs of around that six mils for the last week. So as we go a bit further south through the Southern Midlands, Lewisham, on those lighter soil, those wind-blown sands, again, if we've got rainfall that's this part of the year, we had a bit of rainfall through that southern and Midlands area that was quite sporadic, and it was quite localised, as we can see here. We've got a nice rainfall event that came through there around that 25 to 30 mils. But there's no free lunch. It all gets used up. We're in that similar point, and so understanding, and these are the kind of things that record keeping. I've got that rainfall event in January, what did that mean for me in terms of pasture growth? What grew, what didn't, what those implications mean? The more records you have that you can match up with information and data like this, the better you're prepared when it comes, those rainfall events that are coming that come in years to come. But again, we're always come to that pretty similar location. St. Peter's Pass, a bit further south, we can see here where similar point, and again, these soils are the ones that start to crack as well. And if we go a bit further east, Stonehouse, we've got another nice rainfall event that came here, but pretty much got used up straight away. So those pastures, happily used up. So hopefully that leads to what Jason was talking about, those pastures that are then kicking into gear, that with that lag phase, they'll then start getting a bit of pasture utilisation out of that. So if I go down to Coal Valley, down to Daisy Banks, now near Richmond, not much to tell except to say that, same time last year, no surprises there. And then across to the Derwent Valley, Dungrove on our sandy soils, so similar solution, those windblown sands. We can see here where it's no surprise we're sitting similar as we were last year. As we go closer to Bothwell, and those heavier soil types, pretty much exactly where we were. But as we can see, those gaps between that yield potential there is what we want to see. So, but all things considering, things are looking pretty good down there in terms of some of the crops that have been coming off that part of the world. And then if we go across to Ooze, you can see here again, just broke a record at the moment. Similar times where we were last year. So we're just in that holding pattern at the moment. This is usually what I know we look around and say, yep, it's dry, but this is typical for what we'll find this time of year. So that summary for that Midlands, Southern Midlands, the Derwent Valley and Coal Valley, back to status quo. So we're into that cycle. Similar for a lot of those guys, especially cropping around that Bothwell region. Lower infiltration rate, so make sure you don't fall behind it, particularly with the spuds. And look, yes, it's nice to get those rainfall events that come through, but don't let them side you up. They're just a bonus. And again, we're around that 40 to 50 mils a week of irrigation on, especially on those guys out there with potatoes who have a crop factor of that 1.1, 1.2 in some cases. East Coast and Fingal Valley, you can see here again, similar point last year. And this is a really nice graph in terms of, we can see we had the first 2 years that these probes were in, which is the 4 years ago and 3 years ago. We can see that's the red line and the purple line. They were absolutely cracking springs for this part of the state, as opposed to, we all know what it was like 2 years ago, and this year's been pretty rough there. But we can see here we get to that point there. So while there's not much fodder conservation in that part of the world, but you can see here how it all gets used up again. And if we go into the Fingal Valley, again, those 2 fantastic years, you can see that real discrepancy in that last 3 years compared to the last 2 years we've had there. Where those 2 years we've had elongated growth of our pastures, whereas here they've come up pretty short. So we're in that holding pattern. And then Space Eye, which was one of the first probes that went in as part of our series, we can see here that point there is that real key in terms of what's going to be driving pasture growth when it starts and how long it goes into the season. So where is our feed wedge, and how effective is our rainfall going to be, especially our December rains as well? How effective is it? Has our plants already gone into reproductive phase, or is it still in a vegetative state, which they were in 3 and 4 years ago, that those extra rains will be used up in continuing pasture growth? So our East Coast of Fingal summary, we're at the same time as we were last year. And if you're still irrigating your pastures, to what Jason was saying, look, aim for that least for that 45 mils a week for the next month or so, and then look to start going to that, pulling that back as our day length decreases and our temperatures decrease, so we're not fully irrigating coming into winter. So if we swing along to the islands, we'll start with Flinders. Look at Dingira, which is some of the heavier soils through the middle of the island. We're pretty much bang on the same time we were last year. And Nampara, which is a bit further north, we're pretty sitting just a bit further above. So those rainfalls that we got last year in that early December, we haven't got, but they've been spaced out a bit more. So we can see we've got that fairly uniform use of moisture is going down. So this pasture here has some lucerne within it, so you can see the lucerne starting to utilise that as well. And King Island, very similar story. We've ended up where the same time we were last year, and in the middle of the island on the Bargara Limes, so that Egg Lagoons, that semi-coastal country on our Bargara Limes, where again similar story. So in terms of summary there, we can see that our ETOs are around that 4.5 to 5 for the two islands, so King Island and Flinders. And again, I'd love to see us go into that a wet winter, that typical winter where we are, we see water pooling in our paddocks, places where we could stand, in August this year and last year, we should be able to stand there in August. So really try and I would love to see that with that wet winter to try and reset things, because we're still not quite there. So yeah, as I said, we want rainfall to exceed. At the moment, we're definitely not. I had a graph last time, and I'll check up on it this year. We're already behind again. So while we did have a great season on King Island and things are looking really good, especially compared to the recent year that we had, we're actually starting to fall behind on averages in summer as well. So I'll do a bit more of a deep dive into that next webinar. So our key takeaways, and these aren't including Jason's, which, like I said, there was some fantastic information there, which we will summarise and put up on our fact sheet that comes out and gets sent to you afterwards. Key takeaway: we're now in our normal summer holding period, and your rain is a bonus. I think this is pretty similar to what I had last time. Our next key rainfall is an autumn break, but again, talking to what Jason was saying, how we use irrigation within that is important. So please talk to your advisors, talk to your agronomists, and work out what you need to do to get you through to that winter, particularly on what feed you need to go through. Again, that's that autumn break definition that we have, but there are so many other, don't just rely on that as a rule of thumb. There are so many other more things that you need to take into consideration. We're still at peak irrigation, so most established crops are requiring that 40 to 45 mils a week of irrigation. If you're early spuds, please understand, or anything that starts to slow down. I mean, we're through most of our poppies we've stopped, but any crop that starts to slow down, take that into consideration to know when you need to back off. So make sure you're talking to agronomists about that and get that right. And I put this one in there because I always put this one in there. Go for a walk in the irrigator, bring your shovel, whether you have a moisture probe or not. Make sure that you're getting a greater understanding about how your paddocks are behaving at this time of year, when we have to maximise our water use efficiency, maximising our irrigation efficiency to make sure everything we're putting on as much as we're putting on is being utilised, is important, because it is not hard to fall behind. So I think that's it from me. Again, just the weather stations and farming forecasts that we're using for this data. But thank you. Thanks again for jumping on, and thanks again to Jason for coming on as well. Really insightful from you as always. And until next time,
Marek.
Yeah, see you all.
So Marek, we've just got a question in the Q&A section from Jacob.
Yep.
Can you see that, or do you want me to read it out to you?
Go for it. Read it out.
In an irrigated pasture system where there is an issue with supplying enough water once you get to peak ETO, can't get the pivot around often enough or infiltration fast enough, is there any benefit in trying to bank subsoil moisture earlier in the season? Is there sufficient capacity for capillary rise or hydraulic redistribution to avoid a yield penalty, or is it inevitable?
So if you are going into your peak in pastures in particular, if you're going into your peak water use period and you used up all your stored subsoil moisture, you need to your irrigation scheduling earlier in the season. That's one that we get caught out so often, is we start too late and our pastures are drawing moisture past that 30, 40 centimetres, and you're using up the moisture. If you're using up moisture past 30 centimeters or 40 centimeters in your peak irrigation phase, you're getting a reduction in pasture growth. So the guys at Elliott have shown that with their SIP2 projects. And while that was focused around dairy, if you're growing pasture under irrigation, you want to treat it as a dairy system in terms of making sure the amount of water you're getting on. You do not want to fall behind in terms of using up moisture past that 30-40 centimeters. That subsoil moisture will become, it's not going to be wasted. That'll be really valuable when it comes to what Jason was talking about, coming into autumn, coming through autumn into winter. You will utilize that as part of your as when you reduce your irrigation coming into winter, like spacing out irrigations or putting on less, that's when you will utilize that soil moisture. So yes, that's a fairly it's a bit more nuanced than that, because it does depend on your soil type, your paddock risk. Is it a risk of getting waterlogged? If it is at risk of getting waterlogged through large rainfall events through spring, you're going to be a bit more aggressive at drawing that moisture up. But essentially, it comes down to when do you start irrigating based on where that moisture is being taken up. And in the next webinar, I'll go into that with a little bit of information and data based on what Jason was talking about. But you shouldn't, don't try and bank anything. You try, make sure you're not, don't use a resource too early when there's value in it later on in the season, I guess, is to kind of summarize it. But I'll cut and paste this picture, this question, and I'll do a section on that in the next webinar for sure, because I think it's a really important one to make sure that we address. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll let you be, and see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.